Hey, welcome everybody. Glad to be here with you on our first video stream, talking about things that relate to marriages and families. If you don't know us, my name is Brent. This is my wife, Maggie. We're so thankful to be a part of this time together. We're going to spend about the next 25 minutes here talking about something that's been very helpful for us in our marriage relationship. And then we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A time together. I'll let you know more about that as we continue on tonight. But again, just so thankful for those that are tuning in live with us right now and those that will be joining us later. Maggie and I have been married for 12 years now. We're here in our living room today because of all that's happening and being on quarantine, which means we have also 4 children. So we don't know what's going to happen. We've got a movie on for them. Hopefully that will keep them engaged for the next hour or so. And right. We'll see what happens.
If you hear ruckus, it's probably just children.
Or neighbors.
You know what? He just reminded me that we've been married for 12 years. I just told someone yesterday that we were married for 13 years. That's how good I am at math. So. Well. That's probably like the first thing, one of the first things that you should work on is knowing how long you've been married.
I mean, you know, a rough idea, and that's good enough.
You know, 12, 13.
The biggest thing is to stay with me, so that it keeps increasing in number. So.
Okay.
But yeah, we're really thankful to get to spend some time together here tonight. Again, at the end of this time, about 8 o'clock or so, we're going to have about a 10-minute gap, and then we're going to do a Q&A time via Zoom call. So you're welcome to join in on that. The connection information for that will be at the bottom of the Facebook comments at the conclusion of the live stream. And then also, if you're watching from the Life Action website, at the bottom of the page there, more information. We'll remind you about that as we get closer to our time here together. Mags, a lot of couples right now are experiencing a new phase of reality. Talk a minute about why we felt like it was important to just share some things on our heart related to marriage.
Yes, I think it goes without saying that the world right now is really crazy. And a lot of us, I mean, everybody feels like your whole world, you know, has been turned upside down. And so I think that marriages and relationships are probably struggling more intensely for a lot of people right now.
Are we?
We struggled big time today, just so you know. We had to work through every single point in real life that we are making to you guys tonight. So just so you know, this is coming from fresh out of like our hearts.
We're still working
that we actually had to struggle through today. So, but yeah, people are just, it's really scary and stressful right now. We have new pressures and new stressors on us that we've never had to go through before. And so tonight we just wanted to pause and just take a breather, you know. And while we're all cooped up together, I know a lot of people are still working, but for a lot of us, we're experiencing a certain amount of togetherness that we've never experienced before. And so one of the things that we might as well work on, you know, while we're so together is communication.
That's right. We've discovered that each of us and people that we meet, we all have our own unique ways of communicating, ways that we're individually wired based on how God made us. Our environments, the ways that we were raised, we all have unique ways that we feel the need to communicate and the ways that we communicate with others. Some of those ways are really good. We've been working on those. We've been developing those. We were raised in right kind of environments. If you're like us, some of those ways are not so good and you need some reprogramming in some ways, some adjustments there. So regardless of where you're at on that spectrum right now, like we think there's truths that we're still learning in this process, that every person, every marriage, every family can keep growing in these areas of communication. It's really never something that you fully arrive at. So we're just going to talk through some ways that we're doing that tonight. Hope that this time together provides opportunity to just evaluate, to pause, and to make some tweaks and adjustments to communication skills. If you're married or even had a close relationship with somebody for a period of time, you realize how important good communication skills are for that relationship, for developing it, but certainly for maintaining it as well. If you ever had an argument or a disagreement with somebody, and we've had to walk through that even the last few hours together, it's good communication skills that have helped us through that. You've realized that in times of conflict and disagreement, good communication is what helps you through those times as well. The thing that we've realized the most on this journey in improving our communication, though, is that it is a skill. Like it's actually something that we can work on and be developed more. And it may be not just a skill, it may actually be more like an art form.
That's right. So whether we want to think of it as mastering a skill or honing an art, we know that both of those things take practice. Okay. And so studies have shown, if you want to master something, say you want to be really good at painting or playing an instrument, or you want to, be good at sportsing, which I don't know why you would want to be good at that, but some people want to be really, really good at sportsing.
I want to be really good at sportsing.
So, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of practice. And actually studies have showed that it takes like 10,000 hours of practice if you want to like actually be really good at it, be like known for it. And so I think that gives us room to relax a little and realize that we can give each other grace, because it's okay if we're still struggling and we're not like on top of it, and we're still not really good at this communication thing, because it just takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. But just because it takes a lot of time doesn't mean we don't actually want to put effort in. We don't want to give up, because relationships are kind of important. They're like the most important part of life. And so they're worth investing in, and they're worth the time, and the energy that it takes.
So for us to grow in this area of communication, the practice, the skills required to do that, those three areas for us are these three. It's listening up, opening up, and shutting up. So we're going to walk through those three different categories tonight. One of us is better at opening up. One of us is better at shutting up. But what we're realizing here is that both of us really are needing to work on and grow in the area of listening up. That's the challenge that we face most often. I think as we talk to people, as we travel around the country like we normally get to do, and share things like this, we discover that listening is one of the hardest parts of this. So we're going to start with that. So again, the number one skill in good communication is what, Mags?
Listening, which is actually not easy to do. It sounds easy, but we find in daily practice that listening is a very hard skill to develop.
Yeah, so we want to develop this skill, work on it, practice it to get better at listening well. Communication is not a one-way street, right? It's not just you airing your opinions. It involves two or more people being able to come to an understanding about something, to be able to dialogue further about something. So it's not enough to just work on how we get our words out or whether we should get our words out or not. We have to also work on the receiving end of that, which is about 50% of, if we're doing it well, the communication that we're having. So we have to work on being able to listen well. We've got a friend named Virgil. He has ministered in a variety of cross-cultural places. I think of him as a master communicator. He's like a sensei when it comes to these kind of things for me, somebody that just has learned a lot about that and really helped me grow in these areas. If you want to think of him as a supreme master leader of language, that would be one of the ways I characterize him. But he shared with Maggie and I one time this thought that listening is the master skill of love. So I think as somebody that's investing time tonight to dive into deeper thoughts on relationships and communication, you care about loving those people well. And what I've discovered from Virgil's words is that so true, that listening is the best thing that I can do to demonstrate love for somebody. And it is a skill that no matter where I'm at right now, I can keep working on and growing towards and becoming better at listening. Maggie, why don't you share why it's sometimes hard for those that struggle to listen well?
Yeah, so some people, and you might be married to one of them, or you might be one of them, but some people just have a lot of things to say, and they have a lot of words to get out. And so for them, listening is hard, but we have to remind ourselves, what is the goal of listening? Okay, so here's the goal of listening. The goal of listening is to actually understand another person and to truly know them. Okay, to understand where they're coming from, who they are, and to know them.
Like I thought the goal was to just hear their words, like to be able to check that box off.
No, that's not true listening.
Oh, okay.
So there's a proverb that you should probably listen to now.
Okay.
And it says, a fool doesn't take any pleasure in understanding another person. They just want to express their own opinion. And we don't want to be foolish. We don't want to be those people. So I was talking to this person one time, and they said, it was funny. They said, I really want to work on listening better. And I'm not really good at it. I want to work on it. And I I was just about to open my mouth and give them like an idea that I had for how they could practice listening. And then they started talking for like a really long time. It wasn't Brent, okay? Random person.
I mean, I've done that before, but
Yeah.
It wasn't me in this story.
This story was not you, but I realized in that moment that they actually weren't ready yet to practice listening, because I don't think they understood what the goal yet of listening is. So listening is not being quiet just long enough so that the other person will finally shut up, so you can finally get all your opinions and your thoughts and your amazing ideas and all the amazing things that you know in. Listening is pausing long enough to let the other person actually get their words out. Not because you're hoping to jump in right after that and offer your advice or whatever, but because you're actually curious what they're thinking. You know, you want to know them and hear. You want to know how they're processing life and what they're about. So
I think we can all relate to that story because we all know somebody like that. You may be married to a person like that. You may have had a friend that's like that. That may be you. And congratulations, you're already taking the first step, which is recognizing where your issues begin with all this. But the truth is that on our own, we aren't really able to get to a place of understanding people well. We need to go to that next level of practicing listening, and we don't have to stay where we're at. We can actually move forward. Here's a couple ways we can begin practicing our listening. First, we can just ask good questions, curious questions, specific questions.
that's right. Like questions like, okay, here's some general questions. How was your day? That gives room for a general answer, you know, good, fine, terrible. You can say a short answer. But if you really want to get to a place of understanding someone, then we have to kind of practice again the art of being curious about a person. And so we can ask a little bit deeper questions like, what did you actually mean, you know, when you said that? Or what's bothering you? I can tell that something's bothering you. What is it? What's down there? Or here's a really good question, especially right now. What are you afraid of? Not asking in an accusatory tone, but like, what's going on inside of you right now that is causing you fear and panic or turmoil? Or here's one that I think is a beautiful question to ask each other. What do you need me to know right now? Just what do you long for me to know right now about you? And so, again, we don't ask our questions just so that we can wait for people to shut up and then interject our opinions. We ask because we're curious and we genuinely care about that person's perspective. We care about their thoughts and their opinions and what's going on with them in the moment. And here's the thing. So we don't actually just listen with our ears. Okay. Our ears are hearing receptacles. We can hear with them, but they're actually not good enough for listening. So for listening, we have to engage other parts of our body. And one of those big ways is engaging our eyes, listening with our eyes. So when we are asking someone our questions, our curious questions, we actually need to make, eye contact with them. And because that just shows them when we look up from our screen or phone or whatever, and we actually look at them, it says, I see you, you're important to me, and I'm paying attention right now. And so we want to use eye contact, but there's also another way that we listen, not just with our ears, not just with our eyes. And this is a bit deeper way, but we listen with our heart because we want to find out what's going on in their heart. And so in order to listen with our heart, we have to engage our emotions. And so that's what I think a lot of people miss. So we want to understand people's hearts, the meaning, not just what they're saying. We want to find out the meaning of what they're saying. So we have to listen with our hearts.
We've discovered it's really hard to get to know what's going on in somebody's heart, even if they start using words or try to explain it to you. If they're good at communicating, that's one thing, but if they're not so good at communicating, that's another. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says this, a person's thoughts are like deep waters, but a person of understanding will draw them out. See, the goal in all these ways of growing in communication and growing to understand and listen better is to actually be able to figure out what's going on inside of them, asking those questions, caring about them enough to go deeper with them. And I just love this picture. Like it's deep inside, right? Like it doesn't come out easily. It takes effort, intentionality, energy, and love to be able to do that. One of the distractions for me to be able to listen well is this device right here. I think in our society today, our cell phones keep us from paying attention with our eyes, from really watching what somebody's trying to say to us. We may be on our phone and we might hear in the background some noise or might hear their words, but it's hard to certainly pay attention to what their body language may be saying to us, or certainly to be able to understand deeper what's going on in their hearts when we're not paying attention fully with all that we have. So much of what we communicate to each other does go beyond the words that we choose to share. It's really easy to hide what's going on inside by choosing different words to use. Sometimes you can be in a conflict scenario and somebody can look at you and say, I'm doing just fine. Well, you can tell, right, by their tone or by how their posture is, how they're really doing in those moments. So we have to be able to pay attention to those things, because it's hard to hide how we're feeling with the tone that we use, even more so in the way that our body posture is going on and how they're sharing it. We can pay attention to those things. So using our eyes, we can begin to see much more what's going on, getting deep to figure out what's going on, and becoming a person of understanding in those ways, and then asking those questions to help them open up more and feel freedom to share. So again, we have to start by listening. Here's the second one. This is the one that Maggie, you've had to work on some, the importance of being able to speak your mind. So listening up is number one. Opening up is number two, being able to speak your mind. Another way we can improve communication is sometimes just by being able to share and open up more than we feel like we should naturally. That's easier for some of us than others. I, for example, have no problem expressing my opinion about all kinds of things, right? Setting, regardless of the time, the setting, even how relevant they are to the conversation. I have no problem interjecting my thoughts or opinions or ideas into those moments. It's how my family operated when I was growing up. We would have robust conversations. Some would call them arguments or debates, or knock out and drag out full-on fights sometimes at the dinner table, discussing things that really were not relevant, but we just enjoyed that kind of banter and dialogue, and it helped us become who we are today. It's helped me to be able to get my words out, easily be able to express how I was thinking or feeling. I got a lot of practice in that, how to express myself through my words growing up. So much practice, I even got good at debating points that I really didn't care about or fully believe in. So, which you can imagine is not necessarily good when it comes to marriage. We'll talk more about my issues here in a moment. Maggie, share some of the ways that you are learning to open up more.
Yeah, so I grew up being a stuffer. Some of you know what I'm talking about, where you, instead of saying your words out loud, either you're conditioned or maybe it's your personality to believe that it's better to just keep everything hidden and down, because if you let it out, it's going to create conflict. And I grew up being very afraid of conflict. And so as you can imagine, especially our early years of marriage were like, Brent, throwing everything up.
That's not how I sounded, by the way.
That's how it sounded to me.
Oh, okay.
And I felt like I was more spiritual, which I was really just a little more prideful, but I was always keeping everything down. And so we had a really hard time communicating, but thankfully Brent has been very gentle. And I recommend this, whoever the one is that's good at talking, Brent did this amazing thing where he would just keep drawing out of me my thoughts. He would just keep asking me curious questions, and he would be in this posture towards me where it was a safe place where I could say things that normally I would think, if I say this, I'm either going to get in trouble, or you're not going to love me anymore. Or what if it's not right? Like, what if I'm saying something I'm not even having a correct perception of reality, But he helped me just get my words out and realize it's okay, even if it's not all right. At least we know what we're working with now. So
it's important to get our words out. It's also equally important. This is what I'm realizing in working with Mags these last several years together. It's important for me to help her get her words out too. I think every once in a while we believe that we've gotten to this euphoric place, right, where we understand completely what's going on inside our spouse's head. By now, surely we've arrived. We should be able to read each other's minds. The reality is your spouse is not a mind reader, okay? No matter how long you've been married, you may have some understanding of what they're thinking or feeling, but it's still important to get those words out to be able to share them and to help your spouse be able to do that as well if they struggle to do that well. Especially important in challenging times like right now, right? You're around each other probably more than you have been ever before. It's easy to forget that maybe you haven't opened up. Maybe you haven't shared how you're thinking and feeling. Maybe you feel like you're in the same space, but you haven't actually opened up. So in times like this, I think it's even more important to stress and emphasize, have I actually shared? Have I actually opened up? Have I actually asked those questions of my spouse so that they can share and open up? Because the more that we're doing that, the closer that we can become together and we're growing these skills together. A great famous Irish playwright, George Bernard Shaw, once said this: the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. Okay, so that's humorous, right? I laugh at that idea because I know there's been times where I've had entire conversations only take place in my head. And that's gotten me in trouble when I've come home on a Friday and I had all these weekend plans that I never discussed with Maggie throughout the week, thought for sure that I had, and only to come find out she had entirely different plans for our weekend. But we have this struggle sometimes. We have an illusion that we've communicated, that we've opened up and expressed how we're thinking or feeling, but we have to actually make sure that we're disciplined enough, practicing that skill enough to get those words out, even if we feel like it's something we've said before. Maggie, why don't you share that story just this week, even how we've had to work through that?
Yeah, I mean, even this week, as we're like putting together a message about communication, it's kind of funny that I forgot to communicate my thoughts about how we should put together the message about communication. So you should have seen us today. I mean, we had like the longest painful talks because we had to work out all of our own communication crud, because I had to remember again, you would think I would get it by now, but again, I'm still having to remember that Brent can't read my mind. He doesn't know what's going on inside this head. I hardly know what's going on inside it. So I hardly understand what's going on inside. So I have to get my words out.
There's another side then to speaking our minds, right? We have to get our words out. And this is the one that I'm having to be honest about and to express increasing practice and efforts towards. The other side is the not always side, right? The learning to shut up when it's time to be quiet. Maggie's been great at that side of it. I've always struggled with that. But this is the third skill we have to keep working on. We have to listen up. We have to speak our mind, but then the not always piece, learning able to know when it's the right time to be quiet. This is the practice that I'm working on the most in my communication right now, the skill of knowing when to shut up. Proverbs says it like this. I love how blunt and honest and to the point Proverbs can be. Proverbs 10, chapter 10, verse 19 says this: where there are many words, sin is unavoidable, but the one who controls his lips is prudent. Here's what I've discovered. Sometimes and oftentimes, the more I talk, the more trouble I'm going to get myself into. So I'm having to learn to practice the discipline of being quiet at times. Another translation says it this way: too much talk leads to sin. Be sensible and keep your mouth shut. Okay, so for some of us that don't have trouble getting our words out, this is the kind of thing that we have to exercise and practice. I, this week, had to practice that with Maggie. One of my kids made a comment that precipitated Maggie making a comment that led to me saying something that was very unkind. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but you would think very unkind things about me, which would be probably true about who I really am if you got to know me. But I've had to learn this week that I said something that was not the full truth of what I wanted to say, and was said in a tone that was not helpful and a really bad timing. And it was just destructive to our relationship. And I asked Maggie to forgive me. She's gracious to forgive me, but the damage is already done at that point in time. Mag, we should kind of make sure we're moving through this. So let's just kind of hit some high level summaries of these things on what the difference is and how to share with life, bring life into the words that we share and not death. So there are life words and there are death words. Talk about some of the pain that causes sometimes.
Yes, there's a Proverbs that says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. So we see that our words really do matter. And they really do have an effect when we open our mouth. And so, most of us, some of the greatest emotional pain that a lot of us have experienced are from words that people have spoken, death words over us. A lot of us have a childhood memory maybe of something negative that someone said to us that sort of has hung over us over a long time. Or there's also life words. We have the ability to not just destroy someone and tear them down, but we actually have the ability to build them up. And so a lot of us have childhood memories of maybe someone who's spoken a blessing over us or said, you're really good at this. And we've held on to those things and they've actually shaped and formed our direction in our life.
One of the ways to speak life into that is to use honesty and not dishonesty in our communication. I don't think any of us strives to be dishonest in what we share in our relationships with one another, but some of the subtle ways that I do that, I use sarcasm a lot. Okay, it's kind of my language of choice most often. I've had to realize that that's communicating one thing with my words, but something else entirely behind my meaning or my tone. And that's been very damaging to our marriage at times, to our kids. My kids have started using sarcasm and they're not very good at it. So I'm realizing that it's making a bigger impact there than I thought. I also will exaggerate at times, which is not full honesty, right? Maggie will do something or one of my kids will do something and I'll say this, you always do that, or you never do this. That's not true. That's not reality. That's not being honest. And that's not bringing life into our relationship. That's bringing death instead. Maggie, share how that looks for you, you can open up and be more honest in your communication.
Yes, it's hard to be a truth teller. But if you're not a truth teller, you can't actually deal with your issues. And so a lot of times I've had to learn when Brent asks me, are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. That's actually not helping us. So I need to tell the truth. No, I'm not okay. I'm really frustrated right now.
Second way that we can bring life into our communication and the words that we use and not death is to speak kindly and not harshly. Proverbs 15:1 says this, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I think you've been in a conflict scenario with somebody that was good at speaking kindly and calmly. You've watched how that conflict scenario has resolved itself much quicker in those ways. We have to be very careful not to be harsh in the tones that we use, the words that we choose to use, and instead speak kindness over those things. I love memes online. We found this the other day. I thought this was appropriate for the time that we find ourselves in. It was a post online that said this, my wife and I played this fun game during quarantine. It's called, Why Are You Doing It That Way? There are no winners, okay? So the reality of this is, especially times when you're spending more time together, it's really easy to get critical, to begin criticizing, to finding faults in that other person. And we have to be intentionally observant of that, not being harsh or critical, but instead being kind and gracious and loving in the tones and the words that we use. Maggie, share that third and final way that we can breathe life into our relationships and not death.
Yes, the last way we're going to talk about is just how to speak not hastily, but thoughtfully, which means we actually think about the effect that our words are going to have before we say them. And knowing that our words are either going to bring life or they're going to bring death. Now, I know that a lot of times, especially when you're in a heated argument, it feels really good in the moment to just throw up verbally on the other person, because you kind of justify in the back of your head and go, I'll go back later and tell them that I didn't really mean that. But the effect of our words, we don't ever get to take that back. Right. And it goes on. And although we can forgive people for hurting us, words still affect us. And so we need to be really thoughtful about what we're saying. That's
had to be really something I practice a lot as somebody that likes to process externally. I've had to realize that once I've set that word out there, I can't take it back. I can't erase it. I should and need to ask for forgiveness, and hopefully that gets extended to me. But once it's out there for eternity, and I can't really bring that back and erase it from somebody's memory. So one of the ways I'm practicing this discipline of learning to be quiet, learning to hold my tongue. A guy named Dallas Willard is somebody that influences us a lot. Check out his writings. He's passed away a number of years ago, but this is what he said that he's working on, and a discipline that I'm learning to practice as well. It's what Dallas described as practicing the discipline of not having to have the last word. There's been so many times in a conversation with Maggie, or in a meeting, or in a group conversation, or in a one-on-one conversation, where I feel like it's so important for me to get that last word in. And I'm practicing this discipline of, hey, I don't have to have the last word. And you know what? Those conversations, those meetings, those dialogues go a lot better when I'm not the one having the last word, and I'm allowing the Holy Spirit to use other people to be able to minister well. Oftentimes their voice is the one that needs to be heard. When I practice that, it's not only demonstrating for my own good, but it's allowing room for the Holy Spirit to work in more powerful ways.
Okay, we made it through. So we're about to wrap up. We just want to say again, this is really a hard time for everybody. And so as we learn how to communicate with each other, let's give each other a ton of grace, and let's give ourselves a ton of grace. And remember that this is all a process, learning how to be with each other and how to communicate and have a healthful relationship. And so maybe, I know we just like threw a ton of stuff at you and it could feel really overwhelming, but maybe just take like one or two things, small steps, like just this week, in growing either in your listening or in your using your words, practicing using your voice, or in just being quiet.
I remember, again, Maggie shared this a minute ago, communication is hard. We've certainly not mastered it. We're continuing to work on it. Again, find those one or two areas to be able to do that. It's so hard. We see that in God's word, that this is a battle. James 3:8 says this: no human being can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil full of deadly poison. None of us, Maggie or I, none of you can be able to grow in these areas on your own strength and by your own power. You need God's help. And thankfully, Jesus set us this amazing example. When you look at Jesus' life over and over again, I'm amazed at how excellent he communicated. He listened well. He shared when he needed to. He allowed other people to inject their opinions when he felt like that was what they needed to be able to do in those moments. And so Jesus was a master communicator. He left us his example, and his spirit now lives inside of us for those that follow and believe what Christ has done. So we can rely on God's help for those things. A prayer that I'm praying, Psalm 141, verse 3. Great prayer for those of us that want to grow in these areas, especially those that maybe struggle to get our words out too often. It says this: set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. So God, that's just my prayer tonight for myself and for Maggie, for those that are watching this stream tonight, God, that you would help us to want to grow into deeper ways of communicating better, of being a person of understanding. I believe the world needs more people ready to listen and understand and ask those deep-rooted questions that lead to deeper dialogue and point people to you. Help us to open up where we need to remember that we have an opportunity to play in the formation of others, and that our words are what, God, you use often, but also help us to just guard our tongues in the ways that we need your help with those things. I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, it's been fun. We're thankful we got to share these thoughts with you. Hopefully we'll have more of these videos coming at you these next few weeks. Right now, there's a lot of things that we would have loved to share but didn't get to, so we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Actually, 5 minutes, because we went long. They said 5.
You got a text?
Yeah.
Okay. Maggie got a text from our influencers. So
you got a text too, but you were talking.
I was. So 8:08, we will gather on the Zoom link provided in the comments below. If you're on Facebook, or at the bottom of the website on the Life Action page, if that's where you are. And we'd love to dialogue with you more, hear your questions, be able to just share some more things that are on our heart regarding this area of communication. We love getting to talk with you more in person when we can see your faces than we can when it's just a one-sided conversation. So I hope you join us there in 5 minutes, 8:08. Join us in that Zoom link below. See you next time.
Thank you.